All right, cool. We're going to get started. So before I dive in too much here, just quick show of hands. How many of you write fiction? Sure. Any nonfiction? Okay, all right. Okay, that's going to inform some of the examples. Glad I didn't put money on that. Yeah, anyway. Welcome to Media Relations for Independent Authors. My name is Emily Labus-Royce. I'm going to introduce myself more in a moment here, but before I do, want to do a quick overview of media relations to make sure everyone's in the right place. So, in case you didn't already know, media relations is, the definition would be, working with the media for the purpose of informing the public about you and your work with a positive spin. It's getting good press, guys. So, as we'll touch on later briefly, it can also be about managing negative attention, which no one loves to do, but it's part of life. So in terms of earn for pay for play, this is kind of like the pillar of media relation, or one of the pillars of media relations is that you are getting people to write about you without having to pay them. In other words, you have interested a journalist so much that they feel compelled to cover your story. Once you get into pay for play, you're talking more about advertising, but there are a lot of services. You'll probably get emails, hey, I'd love to feature you in my independent authors to watch. That'll be $500, please. That's not media relations. So one interesting thing about media relations is that it is one of the few areas of MarComms, marketing and communications, where the metric you are not measuring sales as a metric. So here you can see the things that you are measuring. Media feedback I just want to touch on briefly because frankly, you can send out hundreds and hundreds of pitch emails and get nothing. So even your declines are proof. If you get someone that says, thank you for sharing, I'm not going to cover this at this time, that's better than not getting anything because it means that they took the time to read your email, that your subject line and your pitch were engaging, and that they respect you enough that they want to respond to hopefully have a relationship somewhere down the line. But yeah, so you can't really measure sales with PR. If you are ever talking to a freelancer or a firm who says they will guarantee you sales, run. There is not a good, as of yet, and I have a feeling this could change, but at present, there is not a good way to measure the efficacy of your PR campaign through sales because a lot of it is building goodwill and getting people to know your name, and those people might not always be motivated to buy immediately. As I mentioned, media relations is a branch of PR. So other types of PR include charity or brand awareness initiatives, awards, events. What I'm doing right now is, fingers crossed, hopefully good PR for us. Events, or I mentioned that, and then book tours. Those are just a few examples. There are lots of other things that PR encompasses. These are my two favorite infographics of all time. I like to put these up here to kind of further illustrate the breakdown of where PR falls in sort of the promotions pyramid. Yeah, definitely grab a picture of this. And if you're coming to our Soundbooth Theater's audiobooks versus audio drama panel tomorrow, we will be showing this again. It's a great slide. The way I like to summarize it, though, is that marketing is about crafting your message and getting it out there organically. PR is about exciting people enough that they are talking about your message, and advertising is paying people to talk about your message. So just at a high level. I'll let you go there before I move on. Okay. All right. Sure, yeah, all yours. All right. So this is what I like to call the imposter syndrome slide. In other words, why I'm here. So as you may know, I am the Director of Marketing Communications for Soundbooth Theater. I also, in a prior life, was a book publicist for many years. I worked with independent authors. I worked with some of the big 5 publishers. After I moved on from PR, I ran marketing communications for a data warehousing company. That was a fun way to learn what marketing was. But I continued to freelance. Reason being that PR is definitely one of those fields where if you stop doing it, you will stop being good at it. There are things that are constantly changing and constantly evolving, and it's always good to stay in the mix. So more recently, I have continued to do some freelance PR with the agency that I worked for, like my first job out of college, so they've known me for years. Gotten to work with some really cool people. This is also the part of the presentation where I just say, I am not available for freelance PR. You cannot pay me. I am not trying to sell you anything. I'm just here because this is something that I care about. But to that end, Soundbooth Theater, because I do really think that this is an important area of promotion, and I think one that especially is underutilized for independent authors. So we've already started trying to integrate some of this with our, kind of top best-selling authors. Next year, we're going to be going for 5 to 12. I'm going to be doing campaigns for. And my big goal is for by the end of 2026, I want to be getting at least 3 media hits for every single author. But again, you can't hire me. All right. So let's talk briefly about the types of media. Print.com, online. This has changed a lot even since I started in the field. There used to be such an emphasis on getting those major print hits. Now people, if someone's not on the front page of the New York Times print edition, but they are on the front page of the website, a lot of people consider that just as good, if not better. Broadcast, you've got your television, radio, online radio and TV, and podcasts. And then I want to touch briefly on social media. That's an interesting one. So when I was first starting out as a book publicist, that was kind of like the advent of booktubers. And back in the beginning, we worked with them a lot like we would work with journalists. We would send them ARCs, and if they were interested, they would do a review. But these days, a lot more of those people, since the advent of influencer marketing, a lot of times that has shifted to where, you're basically sponsoring these people. So, social media campaigns and stuff, kind of a little bit at the middle of the Venn diagram of marketing and PR, and advertising, frankly. But I wanted to at least touch on it, because those booktubers and now I guess book talkers can be super effective. But as far as my understanding is that the principles of working with them are not the same as journalists. So if you want to get an influencer, just do your research. So now let's talk about types of coverage briefly when we're talking about media relations. So as authors, reviews are great for you guys, obviously if they're positive. You can also do interviews and Q&As. That could be written or broadcast. Guest posts and op-eds. So it's a guest post if you're going to a blog. It's an op-ed if it's like a major print or print.com. And that is where someone is running a post that you have written, which can be really great in terms of positioning yourselves. Then there are also features. I think, honestly, this is kind of like the holy grail. If you can get somebody who's going to dedicate an entire segment of a news show or article to you and what you're doing because they find you that fascinating, like that's awesome. And then there's also expert commentary, and if there were more of you who did nonfiction, I would speak a little bit more to that, but I will just briefly say that for those of you who are nonfiction authors, anytime there is news in your niche, you should be out there positioning yourselves as an expert who can speak on it. And that goes for you fiction authors too, but it's a little bit more of an uphill battle. Okay, so press materials. I'm sure everyone here knows what a press kit is. They still definitely have their place, but that is something that we are starting to see less and less. A full press kit often is comprised of a press release and a bunch of one-sheets. And what the one-sheets are really depends on the subject matter of your book. So if you have a lot of praise from other authors in your genre, that could be a one-sheet. If you're writing in a fantasy world, including a map of the world you've created could be a really interesting one-sheet. And the purpose of these press kits is to get both inform and add color. One thing that we've started to see a little more is that people, not everyone, but there are people who instead of doing the traditional press release have kind of adopted this press release one-sheet hybrid that's a little bit more of like quick hits. And I think the reason for that is like attention spans, honestly. But it really, what's going to work best for you kind of depends on your material. So the big thing would be when you're thinking about what kinds of one-sheets that you want to include in a press kit, thinking about what is best representative of my work that will simultaneously entice a journalist to cover me. And again, no, sorry, that was it. So but one thing I want to stress before we move on is that 9 times out of 10, this is not what you're sending at the first point of contact with a journalist. This is what you send when they request more information. And if you're really lucky, they might even just run a part of your release or one of your one sheets as, you know, their coverage. And then, you know, that's great, because then at least you know it's been proofread. So pitching media, yeah, at least once, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys a sample pitch in a minute here, but before that I wanna talk about the best practices. So when you're sending an email to a journalist, you wanna tailor that pitch. One of the first interactions I had with a freelance journalist who wrote for a ton of major websites, I was like 23 and starting in PR, and I went down the rabbit hole of her past coverage, and she had written this like 1,250 word manifesto about why Working Girl was just like the best movie ever. I've never seen Working Girl, but it made me want to. And so when I was pitching her, I mentioned that and how much I connected with this piece about a movie I had never seen. And she got back to me and she said, I don't have space for what you're pitching me right now. 9 months later, she reached back out to see if those authors were still available for interview, because we'd had that connection and she remembered that. So whenever you possible, tailor your pitches. It's a lot better than just grabbing an Excel list and doing a mail merge. People can tell when you do that. In terms of pitching, you always want to present the most important or attention-grabbing info first. A lot of times, this is what's going to be what makes your or what the coverage that you want timely. So like if your book is releasing in 3 months, like that's the timely thing. If you're commenting on let's say like some major news that, you know, like you want to be pitching right away, like that's the timely thing. And if it's not timely, then you have to, if you're doing something that's more evergreen, you have to explain why it's important, why people should care. Even when it's not even when it's not time driven, even when you are doing something evergreen, you have to make people feel like it's important to talk about now. And then going back to not sending the whole press kit at once, journalists get hundreds of emails a day, and you don't want to get lost in that shuffle. So if you send them, you know, an 8-page attachment unrequested, they're never going to open it. Instead, entice them with your pitch and wait for them to request that information. So similar, keep your pitches short. And then you want to include key biographical information about yourself or the author you're pitching, and maybe even a press release if you've done one, but put that below your signature. Let them read your pitch first, and then end by saying, you know, for more information, see below my signature, and then it's up to them if they want to read it or not. So before we move forward to my super cool prototype, I want to talk about positioning for a little bit, which is sort of kind of, okay, why should you cover me? Why am I the person to be talking about this? So if you are self-conscious or humble, this is going to be really hard for you, because you got to brag about your accomplishments, you got to brag about your awards, and why you're the best person to be talking about this particular topic. And again, timeliness, and then if it's evergreen, you know, why is it important? So before I move on to this sample slide, I had been planning to share a successful pitch I wrote not that long ago for one of the corporations that was mentioned in my Who I Am slide, and then I read my contract more carefully and realized that I cannot. So, so instead I wrote this really cute prototype for you. And actually, hey Jeff, could I get you to come up here to read this for the folks? All right. I'm gonna get help from one of our best narrators and my boss, Jeff Hayes, ladies and gentlemen. You can be whoever you want.
Anybody I want, huh? All right. Subject: breaking news. This is the most important book of all time. Review or interview opportunity. Hi, journalist. I've taken the time to write an introductory sentence that reflects why I think that you personally will care about this. Now, let me tell you all about the most interesting book ever. This is where I include the title, publication info, etc. Here is another sentence or two with that thing that makes this particularly newsworthy or timely. If necessary, This is where I write a very brief paragraph that includes all the relevant background information or circumstances that you would need to know. It shouldn't be too long, though. I only have a limited amount of time to grab your attention. Here are some bullet points with fast facts. These bullet points might include interesting data, or the notable people who have endorsed the book or are featured in it. It could also be a list of topics that the author can discuss in an interview. This is where I summarize what I'm offering/asking. Flag any additional info included in my signature and let you know I'm available to answer any other questions, send a copy of the book, can schedule time for you to talk to the author, etc. Thank you so much. Emily.
That was unscheduled. I decided we were doing that with Justin's help like 10 minutes before I got here. So thank you, Jeff. But you get the point. So you want to be concise. Bullet points are always good. Again, data, anything to make it feel important, timely, relevant, etc. Okay, so I do want to devote a few minutes to talking about the principles of working with journalists, because this is a big one. A lot of the times, people will kind of, if they're not getting emails, they just forget that there's or if they're not getting replies to their pitches, they forget there's a person on the other end of that email. So the key, like as with any human interaction, be respectful, not just of their time, but of their beat, what they cover. So if you're pitching a journalist, you should already have researched their recent coverage. When you do follow up, do so thoughtfully. If you don't get an email back that day, you can't just send them another email every single day. Hi, have you seen this yet? Hi, have you seen this yet? When you're following up, if it's something that's really time sensitive and you've had prior communication with them where it's like they've seemed like they've been interested and they want to book something, then it's okay to, kind of follow up daily, as long as you're saying, hey, I know this was tentative, we got to get it on the books, whatever. But if it's something that's more evergreen, you have more time, and so I like to only follow up once every, 5 business days or so. And the other thing, too, is when you're following up, try not to have every follow-up email just be, hey, have you read this yet? Hey, have you read this yet? Try to include some new information that makes what you're pitching them even more timely and important. So it feels like you have a reason that you're following up other than you're just, impatient, which anyone who has ever been a publicist is. And then when you're scheduling interviews, you always have to indicate time zones. Every single email. Anyone in this room who communicates with me probably gets super annoyed that I do it as a reflex, for all the time. And it's like, yeah, we've known each other for 5 years. I know where you live and you know where I live. It's fine. But it's like a reflex. Just always get in the habit. And if you have a hard time with daylight savings, just do, ET, PT, CT, MT. For those of you outside the US, you're screwed because I have to look your guys' up every time. And then lastly, so I've talked a lot about email pitching. Pitching over the phone is a thing that happens. It's a thing that I hate doing. But it used to be like the best way to book radio. And especially like when you're calling in the morning, because a lot of the producers leave. The producers of the morning shows, they get to work at 3 in the morning. They're gone by 10 or 11. So, they might check their email before the show or whatever, but your best bet is to try to hit them after their show has come off the air and before their production meeting. And again, this is stuff that you kind of can just figure, there's no guide for this. You just, when you start pitching people, you start to pick up the cadence of their schedule and you start to figure it out. But that doesn't mean that you should call, serial call them all day, every day. If you are comfortable picking up the phone, try to only do it once. You want to get to your point really quickly. You have even less time on the phone than you do in an email to grab someone's attention, because everyone hates talking on the phone, and anyone who says they don't is lying. One other thing that we always say is don't leave voicemails. If you don't connect with someone for whatever reason, just hang up and try them again another day. But don't leave voicemails. I have been doing PR for over 10 years, and I've never had a voicemail returned, ever. I got applause. That's cool. All right. Okay, so this is one of the more important ones, because you identifying media targets and building outreach lists. So The first thing you have to decide or figure out when you're trying to decide what journalists you should be pitching are what your goals are. So, for example, if like doing something, if your goal is to get basically credentials, you just want to see your name in print, and then, really you could be looking at any blog that, covers your topic, and it doesn't really matter if it has 100 users or 100,000 users, as long as it doesn't look like it was designed in 1997, if that's your goal. If you are actively trying to do more to build up your personal profile, then you got to worry more about the name of the outlet, the reach of the outlet. So setting goals is always, setting goals in terms of reach is always great. I can't tell you how many times I would get independent authors though who came to me like, hi, my book is 4 years old, I have 12 reviews, and I want to be on the cover of the New York Times. Cool, same, but it's not going to happen. So when you're setting those goals, always try to be realistic, but you should still shoot for the moon because you never know what's going to happen. So when you're searching for those journalists, make sure that you're using really specific keywords. So let's say if you're a fantasy author, no, I don't like that example. Give me a sec. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I've been doing more nonprofit stuff recently, so it's a little bit more geared towards nonfiction. So if you are in climate change combating tech, you cannot just look up every single environmental journalist because not all of them are going to cover it. You have to talk about, okay, who's covering emerging technology in that space. And then, yeah, don't be afraid to get a little stalkery. So let's say you come across an article and you're just like, wow, I think this person would love my book, but their email isn't listed on the article itself. Check the masthead of the outlet. Check their Twitter, X, sorry, I'm never gonna call it X. Check their Twitter. Check all their social media. Check their website. And then there are also some really cool database subscription services. I use Cision. I'm not gonna talk about it too much because they're not paying me, but it's good. Muckrack is another one. And then Rocket Reach is the one where I think you get 20 free lookups a month, and you just type anybody's name into it, and they give you way more information than I wanted about myself on the internet. But and you can also subscribe to that as well. But the key is just find their contact info. And it is true that a lot of the times in Cision, there will be someone listed who it specifically says not accepting media pitches. And so yeah, sometimes people intentionally make themselves hard to find. But more often than not, they're just not thinking about it. Their priority isn't making themselves available to publicists. They just want to report the news. So, always give it a shot. Worst case scenario, they don't answer or they get mad. So I want to talk briefly about giving a good interview. I say briefly, I'm actually doing pretty good on time. All right. So when you're doing an interview, and I'm talking mostly about broadcasts here, I have an entire I think it's 3 sessions. Each one is an hour, speech and media training that I used to do. And I think one thing that people are always really surprised to find is how, in a situation exactly like this one, how long a minute of talking feels. So I thought I'd been up here for 3 hours already. So. So if you're somebody who has a hard time speaking in front of crowds, you want to be cognizant of that. Make sure you're not just giving yes and no answers. Always try to yes and yourself. You don't have to go on and on, but you want to make sure you're answering the questions. So staying on message and on topic. So those are 2 different things. Obviously, as authors, we hate to say it, but we're all brands, just are. And so you want to make sure that when you're in these interviews, everything that you are saying is consistent with that brand identity. And that you're not, saying or not saying anything that's going to completely contradict everything that you have stated that you stand for. And then staying on topic, just answer the questions, when they ask. I think people have a tendency sometimes to get nervous and try to steer the conversation back towards the things they're comfortable talking about. But I don't know a single interviewer alive who would rather have you go on and on about something that's not relevant versus saying, I'm so sorry, I don't, or not, you don't even have to apologize, but just say, I don't feel qualified to speak on that at this time, or I don't feel comfortable to speak on that at this time. Similarly, that's what you do if you have a question you don't want to answer. Again, if I did have those 3 hours, I would teach you all how to be really sneaky and pivot in interview questions. Pivoting in interview questions is where you make people think that you answer the question, but you're really not answering the question. But here's the thing, if you don't know how to do that, don't try to do it. Just be upfront. There's nothing worse or more cringeworthy to watch as a former publicist than seeing somebody just dig themselves deeper and deeper, all because they were trying to change the subject. So don't let that happen to you. Okay. Do trad authors have the advantage? Short answer, yes. But it's not huge. It's honestly, when I first started back in, like a traditionally published author. So when I first started, most of the major trade publications would not take self-published books. And that's changing a lot. But again, like this is why PR is something that once you start doing it, you gotta stay in the game because it changes. It changes year to year, it changes month to month. But there is, to an extent, still an advantage. One way that we found around it is if you are an independent author and you do not have a publisher, you do not want a publisher, you can still set up an imprint in your name. And that's something that I advise a lot of independent authors to do. So if your name is John Smith, like you can be, John Smith from Exit Sign Publishing. Sorry, that's what I'm looking at. And you can put that, and then you can put that, in the front of your book, on your Amazon page, wherever. And then, you have a publisher. It's you, but you have that publisher. So that's something that you can do. But again, frankly, I think the bigger thing is just kind of paying attention to where these walls are being broken down, because they are. And then if not, like when you're checking, especially for reviews, check the submission guidelines. But yeah, I mean, I think if I were giving this presentation 10 years ago, I would have said, it would have been it would not have been with such a hopeful tenor. So there is an advantage, but it's breaking down. But you just, make sure you're reading any submission guidelines. Okay, so here's the should you invest time, money, or both into PR? And again, remember, you can't hire me. I won't do this. So, but I do have to say that, frankly, I mean, and part of the reason when I mentioned to Jamie and Craig that I really wanted to do this, I think that these are skills that all of you guys can learn to an extent. But I'd be lying if I said, oh yeah, if you can just pick it up and do everything a publicist could do for you. Like things like a book tour, unless you've got 30 hours a week to dedicate to that, forget about it. Also, again, like part of the reason I continue to do PR, it's not because I love it and it's not because I have a ton of time, but I keep freelancing in PR in spite of how crazy things are at Soundbooth, because I know if I get out of the game, I'm going to forget how to do it. So that is kind of part of, like, that's the double-edged sword of it. It's really hard to just fire off a campaign, not do anything, get a couple hits, and then 2 years later do another one. Because part of it's relationship building too. Like I have journalists who, I've been working with for years. The last time I got to work with Jane Goodall, I just, I had a journalist, I sent him a text. I'm like, hey, you want to talk to Jane Goodall? And he's like, yeah, obviously, because who wouldn't? She's amazing. But seriously, that relationship building is a huge part of it. So there is value to getting a firm or a freelancer if you decide that PR is really important to you and what you're doing in this moment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about how to figure that out. So again, first assess your goals and priorities, and then how much time and money you're willing to spend on this. So if you are in a situation where you need sales fast, this is not where your promo money should go. If you are in a position where you want to, amplify your reach and your release, and you understand that some of those conversions might come later, then yes. If you are somebody who you find that you're not being taken seriously for whatever reason, then PR to bolster your credentials and continue to position yourself. So yeah, it's like figuring out what your priorities are. And then if you want to do a campaign, you got to think about the desired scope and scale. I mean, again, it's like, this is something, when I do freelance, I usually, you know, I'll give them like 20 hours a week, and I can spend anywhere from 2 to all 20 hours on a single client. It really depends on the scope. So, and again, like part of this is like, continual. If you've got a pitch out there, you can't just sit on it for a month and then do your follow-ups. Once you've got the pitch out, you have to follow up then, or, you know, not right then. So time is a big part of it. And then, yeah, again, be realistic. Not everyone's going to get on Good Morning America. Not everyone's going to get, you know, USA Today. So, you know, kind of, I think cautiously optimistic is the way to approach this. You know, you want to shoot for the stars, but don't freak out if you miss. And then if you do desire to hire a publicist, freelancer, or firm, do your research. Go in with specific objectives. Know what you want to get out of that campaign so you can find someone who's a good fit for you. Because publicists are salespeople, and they will tell you anything that they think you want to hear, so you hire them. Again, except for me. You can't hire me. But, so it's important for you to know what you want to get out of it. Okay, this is a bonus slide on crisis PR because everybody thinks that they're not going to have to deal with it, and then you do. I once had an intern who told me that was what she wanted to do. She wanted to go into crisis PR, and I said, by the end of this semester, my goal is to have talked you out of that. She is currently a first mate on a yacht. So, mission accomplished. She went literally the opposite way. So crisis PR, you know, it's something that you need to do if you have basically, you know, we all know what a PR nightmare is. So the first thing you got to do is remain calm. You are only going to make the situation worse if you act without thinking. Take a beat. I know if something pops off and people are, you know, and either journalists or fans or whatever are talking about you, the impulse is to jump in there and say something right away. Don't. Just think for a little bit first. You got to address this stuff from a place of being calm. And then if other people are involved, if you have a publisher or you're working with a co-author, whatever, it's really important that everyone gets on the same page. So you have to solidify your message and make sure everyone's on the same page, and don't stray from that message. You know, just be to the point. Similarly, you want to coordinate a media approach if that's what you're doing. So like a lot of the time, like if we have to put out in a statement because like shit went sideways, we just go straight to our newsletter and our Facebook. We don't really you know, do a ton of press releases for that, but you know, kind of depends on you and what you're doing. And then, yeah, being direct without going into too much detail, that's really key. You want to make sure you're saying exactly what you mean and nothing else. Do not say anything that could be left open to interpretation. Sometimes it sucks because people are going to have questions and you're going to want to answer them, but, you know, as long as you're not obfuscating, it's okay to be a little bit vague. Not everyone needs to know, you know, you don't need to air your dirty laundry for everyone. And then this is the most important, know when it's time to involve a lawyer. If whatever is causing your bad PR is involved with another party, particularly one you've been doing business with, it's just good practice to talk to your lawyer before you say anything, just to make sure. And then always read the indemnity clause in any contract ever. That doesn't have anything to do with PR, it's just really good advice. Awesome. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, wow, 11 minutes left. So if you scan that QR code, you can listen to a really cool episode of an audio drama written by this man over here, Matt Dinneman, and narrated by the cat that came up here earlier. So check that out. But do we have any questions?
We do, from our live virtual audience.
Ooh.
So audience members, don't forget to please come to the mic to say your questions so they can hear as well.
Oh yeah, I was supposed to say that, sorry.
We have Cole Chase asking, back at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about a one sheet.
Yes.
Can you define that? Can you show us something? Can you give better examples so we can understand what that is?
Sure. So again, I can't share a lot of my press materials, unfortunately, but I think like, yeah, so if you were a fantasy author, you could do a map of your world, and that could be a one sheet. You could do a list of praise that you've received, and that could be a one sheet. One thing, when I've worked with people who have done a ton of interviews with like really credible sources, I will do, you know, entire like, you know, quotes from those people that are in the book, and it's like, you know, for more like this, read the book kind of thing. For fiction, I've done some really fun things with, I'm trying to think, oh yeah, gosh, this was like years and years ago, but my favorite press kit I ever made, it was like about Bluebeard, does anyone, not the pirate, no, not the pirate, the one who disemboweled children. All right, come find me later. I'm not doing this now. Anyway, and so the myth was based in real life. So we actually like were able to piece together that history, and we did kind of a one sheet that was like a Wikipedia article, but way cooler and better written. I say that because I wrote it. So hopefully that's helpful. I wish I could share specific one sheets, but maybe next year when I have some more from Soundbooth Theater, I can share those. Right, Jeff? Awesome. So next year. Go ahead.
Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for this session. It's been very helpful. My question is two-part. One, does the email matter? Like I've been sent, so my daughter has recently released chapter children's books for little black girls. But I've been sending it as Carla Dupont at Yahoo. So should I be sending it from her business email or create one based on my publishing company? And then two, what info is in the signature? You said refer to the signature for additional.
Sure, yeah. So first question, they do look at the emails, like who it's coming from. As long as it isn't just like, I love rock and roll 69 at Yahoo, you know, you're probably okay. But whenever possible, I would say do it as your publisher. That's gonna get like the most opens probably. And it's good, I'm glad that you mentioned that. You guys are, you know, if you're not going to hire out, you're going to be in the difficult position of having to, you know, be talking about yourselves. But if you work with someone else where you can send the emails from, do that. So like it's great that you're sending them on behalf of your daughter. And then as far as the email signature, that's just like kind of what goes below, you know, like when you sign, after you sign your name. So mine has like our website, our email, or my email. I used to include my cell number. I took it out. And then, you know, a couple like key links, like I think I linked to our Discord, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
On my SIG, it's got my cover art right underneath the other information. So,
Nice.
okay, I have more than one, but I will only ask one and then go to the back of the line. When you have a one page, and I love the idea of having like teasers like you would have on the internet, do you include that in the email or do you put it as an attachment?
So what you would do in the sample, you know, you kind of always sign off with like, you know, there's more information available upon or like more info available upon request, and then they can request it. If you have somewhere that you can post that stuff and link to it, that's fine. But frankly, journalists have like very good spam filters, so you want to stay away from too many links and attachments. And especially, so you said you have an image in your signature.
Yeah.
That's awesome, but if I were you, I would keep the other links in your pitch sparing. So like links are great in pitches, but like you don't want to do more than like 2 or 3. And attachments, wait until they ask.
Okay, so I have a media kit on my website.
Yeah.
So just like put that as the semi-last thing?
Yeah, I would link to that in your emails for sure, since you already have that out there. If you don't have that out there, that's when you get them to ask for it. I mean, there are also, and I could talk about this for a long time, there are some benefits to having, you know, sort of your media kit that's not public, but like it kind of cancels itself out. Like if something's embargoed, then you definitely don't want to be posting that media kit anywhere.
Well, what do you mean?
Oh, so embargoed is when you can pitch journalists under embargo. So if you have a surprise announcement, but you want to have media coverage coincide with that announcement, if you put it under embargo, which literally just entails writing under embargo at the top, the journalist then cannot talk about it until the embargo date expires.
Cool.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
I have a very, okay, it's a unique situation. A few years ago, I was watching an educational series. I'm just going to have to say his name, otherwise it won't make sense, with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he had mentioned a specific subject and said, gosh, I'd love to read a book like this. So I wrote it. And I've been a sci-fi author for a while, and the specific book has lots of 4 and 5 stars. It says dozens of them. So I know it's not an embarrassing thing. I have a meet and greet coming up with him in April, and a friend of mine said, oh my gosh, you know, contact his publicist, contact the newspapers, get all the publications you can. And I'm an author. I'm one of those shy people who just doesn't even know where to start with something like that.
Sure. So what I would do is I would start by reaching out or by researching the local media where the meet and greet is and seeing if any of them are interested. You could definitely reach out to his people too.
Okay.
It's going to be hit or miss whether they get back to you. I've had
Right.
some luck getting to celebrities and otherwise not. But if you are meeting him, if you're comfortable doing this, you could bring a copy, but don't force it on him.
Right. No, I was going to bring a copy and just offer it. say,
Right. But I think
Yeah.
explain to him that he inspired you to, again, because it's
Yeah.
all about connections. These are
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
So back in 2000, I hired a publicist who got me on a whole bunch of podcasts, on a magazine and everything, and then now it's 3+ years later, and I have another book coming out. Is it okay if I contact those people that
Yes.
I was already a guest on?
Absolutely do that. If someone has covered you in the past, they are instantly more likely to at least open an email from you now.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great question.
Okay, so I have a local regional weekly newspaper that's also online. Do I pitch my feature article idea to the like the editor-in-chief, or do I pitch it to like the person who does book reviews?
Oh, God, these are such great questions. This should have been twice as long. So many more things I could have talked about. So yeah, would you be comfortable sharing with us a little bit more what is the idea that you're pitching?
Well, I started writing a bat virus pandemic novel in 2012, and I've literally got a full sheet of comparisons about the ways that I got it right and the ways I flipped it. I killed off 98%, COVID killed off less than 2%. So I think that idea and kind of my history with apocalyptic fiction
Yeah.
and that I'm a local author
Yeah,
is of interest, and it would certainly
totally.
help.
Absolutely. So when did the book come out?
That book came out in 2014, but I'm about to release the 5th book in the series.
Okay. So the further you get in a series, the harder it can be to get PR. I would say go first to features.
Uh-huh.
And then if not, whenever the 5th book is coming out, if possible, try to reach out to them like 2 to 3 months before.
Okay.
And then pitch the new book. But I think, from what you're saying, like that is a really interesting features story that and the subject line right there could be like, meet the man who predicted COVID-19 or something.
Right. So there's usually a features editor on
Yeah,
the
yeah. So you don't
site?
want to go straight to the editor. See, this is the slide I'm realizing I should have included. Which editor do I pitch? Go to the features editor first. The only time you ever really want to go to an editor-in-chief if it's like a small outlet
right.
that has like 2 or 3 people working at it. But if not, always go to the section editors and actual beat reporters first.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Hi, I'm Rosalinda Roman. My career was broadcasting,
Oh,
and I
no
worked
way.
at TV stations around the country.
Do you want to come up here?
If anyone has some questions about how to pitch, I could help with that a little bit. I have kind of the opposite problem. I have a memoir that I published, self-published, about living on a sailing catamaran with my family. At what point do I reach out to all of my contacts, all my friends, all of the stations that I've worked at? Because now I'm working on a thriller,
Okay.
and so I'm hesitant to kind of like, I've got this potentially one shot, like, do I approach everyone now or do I wait?
Yeah. Okay, so here's which one do you, I know it's hard, it's like picking one, which kid is your favorite, but which one do you care more about getting in front of the media?
Definitely the thriller.
Okay, so what I would do if I were in your shoes is like soft pitch it to a few of your the memoir to a few of your contacts now, because honestly, the more your name is in print, the more likely you have to get coverage for the other one anyway, but you're right, you don't want to blow all of those connections now.
Yeah, and I suspect, I mean, they're so different, and there's lots of people who are interested in the fact that I lived on a boat with 3 kids and a German Shepherd, right? So that's one thing, that maybe the morning show kind of thing. And then the thriller is a different
Yeah, you
So-
could go to bloggers and reviewers for that
Anyway,
too.
but mostly I just wanted to say, and two things if I could. One is, you were talking about timing and time zones. If you're pitching to a local reporter, do not call right before the news. We used to make fun of PR people and be like, why are they calling me right now? I have a deadline, I'm about to get on the
No,
air.
you're right, exactly. You try to get them after the news, but
Yeah.
before the production meeting.
Yeah, so like, make sure you know when your local, show is on, the news. And then there was one other thing, but I forgot. So thank
It
you.
looks like I've got I'm so sorry, I have to call it, but I will be at the Soundbooth booth this week. Come find me. And thanks everyone so much.